Hello everyone, and welcome to my list of top 10 piano composers. So I suppose I should let everyone know what my criteria for judging these composers is. First of all, I am only taking into account solo piano pieces. This does not include piano concertos, and this does not include chamber pieces that have a piano part in them. Only solo piano pieces. Second of all, I am not taking piano sonatas into consideration, and this might seem a little bit arbitrary, but the reason I'm doing that is because I am planning to make a top 10 piano sonatas list, and I don't want that list to be too similar to this list. Plus, it just makes it a whole hell of a lot harder to judge these composers or to rank them or whatever if I throw piano sonatas into the mix. So only non-piano sonata solo piano pieces for this list. That's all I took into consideration. Now the criteria I'm judging the solo piano pieces on, I'm really taking 5 things into account. Personal enjoyment, obviously, that's a given. Originality, is the composer, doing their own thing. Piano-specific innovation, do they bring anything new to as far as piano technique, or how people think of playing the piano? Diversity, I am judging on whether the composer shows that they can write multiple types of pieces, or if they're just writing the same piece over and over again. And across the board quality, I might get a little bit of backlash on this last one. I'm talking about consistency and quality. And a lot of people think that you should only judge a composer based on their best works. And I can see their point, but at the same time, I think this is a valid criterion. And I really, in a way, I have to judge across the board quality because we're talking about the top 10 composers for piano. And if I just took their masterpieces and pit them against each other, there'd be really no way to rank them because they're all pretty much the same. I mean, it's the top 10 masterpieces of the top 10 composers for piano. It just ends up being, it'll all come out even, especially for like the top 5. So, I'm not just looking at their best pieces for piano, I'm looking at their entire catalog as far as piano music goes, and I'm judging it as a whole instead of picking out specific pieces. And just remember that this is a top 10 list, and I think all these composers on the list are incredible. It's not like number 10 is horrible and number 1 is great. No, they're all great. There's just little things that make some a little bit better than the other. Not better. I mean, a lot of it comes down to personal enjoyment, but, there's just some things that put one composer over the other on my specific list, anyway. And also keep in mind that all these criteria that I'm judging on, I'm judging all these criteria at the same time. So, number 1 on my list might not necessarily be the most innovative composer or the most diverse composer, but they might be the one I most enjoy, or they're the most original, or something like that. So, just keep that in mind. So, yeah, that's a really long introduction. I'm sorry. So without further ado, this is the start of my list. Let's get this thing going. Number 10 on my list is Alexander Scriabin. Now, I almost didn't include Scriabin on this list because I'm not including piano sonatas as a criteria for judging these composers. And I really feel that Scriabin's piano sonatas are really the backbone of his piano work, and they contain the best of his piano work. But even still, his preludes and etudes are great pieces, and there's also Vers la Flamme. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but yeah, Vers la Flamme is a really great piece as well. The originality of Scriabin's music cannot be denied. I mean, he was one unique as hell composer, and I really love the sort of drugged out, dark quality of his music. I mean, he's really like, Scriabin's like the psychedelic rock of classical music. It's just so freaky and so unique, and I really love that. That kind of voice really speaks to me. He sounded a little bit like Chopin early on, but even then his pieces were so great. I mean, the piece that's playing in the background now is one of his very first pieces, or at least his first published piece. It's a prelude in C sharp minor, and it's such an incredibly lovely piece, and well constructed too. So I mean, he just starts off his piano repertoire on a great note, and it only gets better. So at number 9 we have Sergei Rachmaninoff. Now, Scriabin and Rachmaninoff are often compared since they went to the same school, and had somewhat of a rivalry throughout their compositional career. Now, I much prefer Scriabin, actually. Scriabin's music, his style, appeals much more to me than Rachmaninoff's, and Rachmaninoff's music is sort of the type of music I have to be in the mood for to listen to. However, I did put Rachmaninoff above Scriabin in this list because I feel that without Scriabin's piano sonatas, his overall work for piano is slightly less strong than Rachmaninoff. And I think that's because Scriabin experimented much more. And since he experimented so much with his style, this naturally means that he's not always going to sound quite as confident or solid. Many of his piano pieces do sound like he's trying things out. And then once he goes and writes his piano sonata, he's worked things out. Whereas Rachmaninoff, he is confident with his style from the very beginning. And I think this is simply because he didn't experiment as much as Scriabin. But that confidence in style throughout Rachmaninoff's piano catalog is what makes his piano works overall sound stronger than Scriabin's, minus the piano sonatas. So that's why I put Rachmaninoff over Scriabin, even though I like Scriabin a lot better. But I like Rachmaninoff's music too. I love the sense of urgency a lot of his music has in it, such as the music playing in the background right now. And I do like some of the brooding qualities of his music a lot, although sometimes the brooding qualities are sort of what makes his music a tad boring, to me anyway. When I went back to listen to his music for this list, I was actually sort of surprised at how nightmarish and twisted some of his music actually sounds. He's often credited as being very retro-conservative, which is true, but he could also sound quite dissonant and pretty modernist by 20th century standards when he wanted to, that is. Another reason I put Scriabin on this list is he's just one of those composers, especially for piano, that, he's just really big. Leaving him off a list of top 10 piano composers just didn't feel right to me, even if I'm not as fond of his style as I am of some other composers. Number 8 on my list is György Ligeti. I believe I'm pronouncing that first name right, though I'm not entirely sure. Ligeti was one of the most creative composers of the latter half of the 20th century, and he's one of my personal favorites. He's pretty much on this list for 2 sets of pieces, and those are obviously the 2 books of etudes that he wrote. 3 books, kind of, but I believe he left the 3rd one unfinished when he died. Maybe someone can correct me on that, but I think that the 3rd one's unfinished. But in any case, his 2 or 3 books of etudes, however you want to look at them, are such monumental examples of 20th century piano writing that I think they are enough to propel Ligeti onto this list. They're incredibly creative. Each one deals with sort of a different concept or idea, usually a rhythmic concept or idea, because Ligeti was very interested in rhythm at this time. And the way he wrote for piano is so fresh and unique that that's one of the main reasons he's on this list. It's because his writing for piano is so unique, and it was so new. No other composer used or wrote for the piano the same way Ligeti did. Just to give you an example, in many of these etudes, he turns the piano into this sort of grand metronome, so to speak, and he just piles layers and layers of rhythmic complexity onto the piece until it sounds like 5 people are playing. It's really incredible. I mean, some of the things he does just boggle my mind, sort of. And he does other things too with the piano. That's just one example. It's quite a diverse set of etudes with lots of eclectic influences, such as gamelan music, African rhythms, things like that. I would really love to put Ligeti higher on this list, actually, but he's not higher. And that's because pretty much the only reason why he's on this list is the etudes. I mean, that really actually says something about how great these etudes are. But if he had not written these etudes, I mean, if all he wrote are those early pieces for piano, then he wouldn't be anywhere near this list at all, actually. But since he wrote these etudes, he's very much on this list. So, yeah, Ligeti is a great composer for piano and a great composer in general. Definitely check him out if you haven't. Number 7 on this list is Maurice Ravel. Now, Ravel is one of those composers for me that is, it just hits me just in the right place as far as emotional connection. His music is like a pipeline to my heart, man. No, but really, his it's just so something about the harmonies and the melodies. Just there's such a sensuous beauty about Ravel's music, and this comes through in his piano writing. And Ravel is really one of the first composers on this list to have an incredibly even output for piano as well. I mean, the consistency and quality he keeps throughout his entire catalog or whatever is really great. I can't think of a piano work of his that I would consider not so great. They're all really good. I mean, the sonatine that's playing in the background, Mirrors, Gaspard de la Nuit, the Mother Goose Suite, Noble and Sentimental Waltzes, Le Tombeau, all those pieces are just really great. There are some like little one-off pieces, so sort of like not little, not so important pieces. Like there's a really short prelude, and maybe you could say that they're not as good as the other ones, just simply for what they are, but they are good for what they are. Well, one reason why Ravel is not higher on this list, because I obviously think very highly of Ravel, but yeah, as great as Ravel's piano pieces are, I feel that his creativity and imagination really came out when in orchestral pieces. And so, in some ways, I really consider Ravel an orchestral composer, a little bit more so than a piano composer. Just because he was such a great orchestrator, and that's one of the things that he was really known for. And a lot of his piano pieces are also orchestrated as well, so but still, his piano pieces are still really amazing. One fun little tidbit before I end this section. Ravel actually wrote what is considered to be the hardest piece in the main piano repertoire, or was for a while. I'm not sure if it still is, but the final movement of Gaspard de la Nuit is pretty ridiculous, or so I've been told. I'm not a pianist, so I'm not sure I qualify. But you can take that little tidbit to the bank. So at number 6, we have Franz Liszt. Now, Liszt was by far the hardest composer for me to rank. And to be honest with you guys, I'm still not entirely sure about his place on this list. Let me explain a little bit. I know a lot of you out there are probably going to contest Liszt's place as number 6. That's pretty low for a composer like Liszt, especially on a top 10 piano composers. Let me explain. I'll tell you guys that if I was making this list on a more objective basis, I would have definitely put Liszt as in the top 3. Probably. If not top 3, then at very least top 5. I mean, he was one of the big 4 romantic piano composers. He was extremely influential on piano technique and piano writing. He was just such a giant figure. One of the biggest figures in all of classical music. Right up there with Beethoven and Wagner as far as just sheer gravitas of his influence and things like that. However, this is also a personal list, and it's subjective, and as much as I really love some of Liszt's piano music, I mean really love, I just could not ignore that there is a huge chunk of his piano music that I really don't love as well. The problem with Liszt is that he is so wildly inconsistent. For me, anyway. On one hand, he wrote some of the greatest masterpieces in the Romantic era piano repertoire. Just great. I mean, The Year of the Pilgrim, the Piano Sonata. I know I'm not judging on piano sonatas, but I had to throw that one in there because it's just that good. But on the other hand, he also wrote some of the most banal and trashy music of the Romantic era too, or piano music, I mean, in my opinion at least. I mean, it's a little bit amazing to me that the same composer who wrote a piece like the Year of the Pilgrim or the Piano Sonata also wrote stuff like Grand Chromatic Galop or whatever that is, and some of those etudes. I mean, the problem for me with these pieces is that virtuosity in music is an aspect of music that I think is really uninteresting for me. Virtuosity is probably the least interesting aspect of music for me, and a lot of Liszt's pieces revolve around virtuosity. I mean, like lots of scales, and a lot of that stuff just feels really empty to me. But then on the other hand, like I said, there's a huge chunk of Liszt's piano music that is the complete opposite of being empty. So that's why he was so hard to rank for me. But I do want to say something about Liszt's piano music before I end this section, and that is that so much of the good stuff is not known to people, and this is one of the most amazing aspects about Liszt's music to me, as far as his relation with the public, and that is, it's incredible how much of his quality music is buried under nonsense. I mean, I only heard about the Year of the Pilgrim about a year ago. See, when I was growing up and reading about Liszt and hearing about him, I was like, oh yeah, he was that guy who wrote the Hungarian Rhapsodies and a whole bunch of other really impressive, flashy piano music. But there's so much more. There's so much more to his music that is just overshadowed by his reputation as a virtuoso piano composer. And when I first heard The Year of the Pilgrim, I thought, why? Why is this not his more well-known piece rather than like the Paganini Etudes or something like that? It's just incredible to me how much of his music is how much of his really, really good music is overshadowed by his more mediocre music. And also, pieces like the Mephisto Waltz, which is the one playing in the background, or the first one, like the Mephisto Waltzes and the Lugubrious Gondolas and some of the other pieces really highlight Liszt's forward-thinking mind, and that's an aspect of Liszt that's really overlooked a lot of the time, because again, his reputation as a virtuoso piano composer really overshadows his more experimental side. And when you go back and listen to some of these more experimental pieces by Liszt, it's incredible, really, some of the things he was coming up with. Like he was one of the very first composers that was starting to think of building harmonies out of fourths and things like that. All those like quartal harmonies and things that 20th century composers would pick up later. But anyway, I'm sorry. That's sort of my rant on Liszt's piano music. I just think it's so incredible how much of the really good stuff is overlooked. But anyway, great composer, really. On a more objective list, he'd definitely be among the very top. So we've reached the top 5 composers, and as you can see, my 5th composer is Olivier Messiaen. Now, since this is a personal list, I really wanted to put a late 20th century composer fairly high on the list, because I really enjoy late 20th century music, and I'm probably in the minority as far as everyone in the world is concerned. So I think this makes my list a little more unique and not so cookie cutter, maybe. Not to be presumptuous or anything, but I felt it was a good decision to make. And I think if any late 20th century composer deserves to be on this list for their piano music, it's definitely Messiaen. He didn't write a crap ton of music for piano, but what he did write is just spectacular. The catalog of birds, little pieces of birds, 20 glances at the infancy of Christ, are all really great pieces. Even the early 8 preludes he wrote when he hadn't quite yet found his voice, even those are really great. I think the thing I really like about Messiaen's music is he uses his unique voice, which is sort of a blend of Impressionism and his own mathematical ideas about music. And he just creates such a diverse palette of colors and emotions with this language. And he treats you to this diverse palette of colors and emotions almost all at once. His music jumps around like crazy, but in a good way. I mean, 1 minute he'll be writing these really icy, chilling clusters up in the high registers of the piano, and then suddenly he'll be in the low registers and writing this really spacey, almost religious sounding music. Or maybe he'll be writing some really frantic sounding music, and then suddenly it'll jump to this really slow and kind of creeping music. And it's just this jumping around. It's like little bursts of color and emotion that are really strong and concentrated and just hit you and then move on to the next thing. And I find the way he does this is extremely primal and visceral, and it's really effective, I think. Also, his use of rhythm is just so unique. I don't think anyone writes rhythm like Messiaen. He just has a great way of writing these really funky grooves, but they're not like other funky grooves. They're really Messiaen-like. I don't know how else to put it, but just listen to some of his rhythms, and you'll know it's Messiaen from that too. So yeah, really great composer with a small but very solid catalog of piano works. So at number 4, we have Frédéric Chopin. Now, like Liszt, Chopin is a composer that many people might feel is too low on my list. Although number 4 is not shabby at all. But many people might feel this way because Chopin is really the piano composer. I mean, if I was judging this list based only on innovation, pianistic innovation, and influence, there's no question I would put Chopin as number 1. I mean, if you look at the piano writing of Mozart or Beethoven, and you compare it to Chopin, his music, there's no question his music changed the face of piano writing forever. Completely. I mean, his style of writing for piano was unprecedented and completely unlike any other composer's piano writing, but it made complete sense. And if you look at his music, many of the classic techniques for writing for piano was originally found in Chopin's music, and you can sort of pick those things out. The reason that he is number 4 on my list rather than a lot higher, like number 1, the reason is actually really simple. It's because there are 3 other composers whose piano music I like better. And that's really the point we're at on this list. I mean, most of these composers at this point, I really have no reason for putting above one another other than my own feelings toward their music. But there are plenty of reasons to love Chopin's music. One of the reasons I love his music is because it's just so original. I mean, plenty of the great composers have a unique voice. But Chopin's got a unique voice that is instantly recognizable. No other composer sounds like Chopin. And that's a reason to like a composer, right? I mean, you can't get Chopin sounding music from anyone but Chopin. And in a lot of his pieces, just that melancholic and nostalgic, sort of magical vibe that you get in his music is completely unique to him. I have not yet found any other composer that has quite the same vibe, even though plenty of other composers have tried. But there's only one Chopin. Another great thing about his music is that Chopin found this really great balance between diatonicism and chromaticism. I mean, you look at some of his bass lines, and they're extremely simple, and a lesser composer might put something equally simple on top. But sometimes what Chopin puts on top is extremely chromatic, and almost a little bit 12-tone-ish sometimes, on rare occasions. But you put those two parts together, and the way Chopin does it, they just blend together and create such a great balance of diatonic music and chromatic music. And Chopin is really one of the first composers to start experimenting with chromaticism within the confines of common era harmony. I mean, Mozart did to some degree the same way Chopin did, and obviously Mozart was very influential on Chopin. Beethoven, not so much. Beethoven was revolutionary in other areas, obviously. But his music is actually very diatonic. Beethoven was more about putting dissonant chords in surprising places and modulating to more remote areas than had been heard before in relation to the tonic. But Chopin's music took chromaticism to a completely unprecedented level at that time, and that's something to really admire in his music. I want to talk about the emotional quality of his music too, and specifically the emotional quality in relation to how I perceive it. This is actually one of the reasons he's not quite so high on my list, and that's because I find him a little bit uneven in terms of how he affects me emotionally. And that's true of most composers. However, it's glaringly true of Chopin because when his music hits me emotionally, he hits really hard. I mean, Chopin's music, I get feelings from Chopin's music that I simply can't find in any other composer. It's just such a unique feeling I get from his music. It's such a powerful feeling. But on the other hand, a lot of his music is really just meh to me as far as its emotional quality. And I mean, this is like I said, this is true of most composers, but it's very profound with Chopin because his highs are very high with me. Another reason he's not quite so high for me is when you listen to a lot of his music, it does start to sound a little similar, and for me, it can wear a little bit thin if I get too much at one time. And this is partly because his music is so unique that it's uniquely similar across the board. And it also has to do with the types of compositions he composed too. I mean, you can only write so many mazurkas before they start sounding very similar to each other, just because of the strict nature of what a mazurka is. But I mean, it's not too much of an issue. His music is still great, but you know, I obviously had to do a lot of nitpicking when it comes to ranking such great composers that are so close together in terms of quality. So, number 3 on the list is Robert Schumann. And that's actually a little bit of a strange choice for me because about a year or two ago, I didn't really like Schumann. But over the past year, his music has really grown on me a lot. One of the most fun things about discovering Schumann's piano repertoire is that you never quite know what you're going to get with him. You could get something heroic and grand, like the Fantasy in C that's playing in the background. You could get something very dark, like Nachtstück. You could get something very fleeting and light, like Papillon. Or you could get something very angry, like the beginning of Kreisleriana. So Schumann's a very multi-faced composer. He's kind of got something for everybody, really. And his music just has this really charming, unpolished quality to it. It's very quirky, and that's something I really like about his music. But it also has this very breathless and unstable quality to it as well that I find very attractive. And even the way he starts his pieces, a lot of his pieces start as if you're stepping right into the middle of something right away. I mean, a lot of his pieces, he barely even gives you ground to stand on before he starts sort of pulling and twisting your emotions. So that's a really interesting quality in his music. And overall, his piano work as a whole is just extremely solid. I mean, Schumann and the next two composers in the list, just have these their whole piano repertoire is just very, very consistent in quality. I mean, I can't think of a work by Schumann. Well, actually, there's one piece of Schumann that I'm not too fond of, and that's Carnival. I'm not too fond of Carnival, but other than that, Schumann's piano repertoire, um, there's nothing else I would consider not that good. And I don't even really consider Carnival not that good. It's just I don't really like it. But yeah, very solid, very consistent body of piano music that's very varied in emotion and quality, and it's all really just fun. I mean, Schumann's music takes you on a ride, and that's one of the best things about it. There's just one thing I don't really like about his music, and his piano music in particular, and that is it can get a little bit repetitive. Like most of the composers around this era, he built a lot of his miniatures, or piano miniatures, around these repeated sections, and sometimes the repeats get a little tiring. But that's not a horrible denouncement by any means. So yeah, really great composer. Really, like I said, really fun composer. So at number 2, we have Claude Debussy. Now Debussy is right up there with Monteverdi and Beethoven as being one of the most innovative and groundbreaking composers of all time. And he's often not given the credit he deserves for this. And that's mostly because his sound and his style is very much in our ears at this point. And it doesn't sound new and innovative to us because we're so used to it now. Whereas a composer like Schoenberg, his style and his music is still rather alien to most people. But back in the day, back in the early 20th century, when Debussy and Schoenberg were both composing, Debussy was just as radical and innovative and controversial as Schoenberg's music. And I would even say more so, because much more than Debussy, Schoenberg's music was following a tradition. Schoenberg's music was really just following the natural progression of Austrian German music at the time. But Debussy's music really came out of nowhere for the most part. He has a little bit of precedence in Fauré or Liszt, I guess, but for the most part, it's just completely new and out of left field. And his piano music was no less innovative and groundbreaking. I mean, if you completely reinvent the language of Western music, you've got to come up with new ways of writing for piano that are more idiomatic to your new musical language. And Debussy did this wonderfully. And it's just so new and so... I mean, it boggles my mind how he came up with all this all on his own. I mean, it's amazing. As sort of mainstream-ish, I guess, as his music sounds now, just imagining how crazy new it must have sounded back then is incredible. I think it's incredible anyway. Um, so, like Schumann, Debussy's piano repertoire contains a wide variety of music. His piano music ranges from very simple sounding to very crazy and complex sounding, from really angry to really ecstatic, from joyful to really sad and sobering. And you even got some ragtime in there, so it's a very wide range of emotions and expressions found in Debussy's music. And also, like Schumann, his piano repertoire, taken as a whole, is extremely solid. Other than maybe a few really early pieces before he even found his voice, I wouldn't get rid of a single Debussy piece. And I don't think there is a piano piece by Debussy, other than those few early works, that after listening to, I don't just go, oh man, that was great. I mean, you can pick any piano piece, and it's going to be really quality work. And it contains so many staples of the 20th century piano repertoire too. I mean, the preludes are just, they're just monumental. Some of the best pieces in the 20th century. And with the etudes as well. And maybe to a lesser degree, the images. Just such great stuff. And that's probably why he's number 2. I will say that Ravel, as a composer, does affect me a little bit more directly, emotionally. However, I find Debussy's music to be a lot more fascinating than Ravel's. I mean, Ravel's music is like the kind of music that makes you want to enjoy a long bath. But Debussy's music is the kind of music that makes you want to explore the bathroom. Oh, that's such a weird analogy. But it works. I mean, that's kind of how it is for me, I suppose. So yeah, Debussy is just such an innovative and quality composer, full of music to explore and keep coming back to and finding new things. I mean, you could listen to his music, or I could listen to his music for years and years and not get bored of it, probably, because it just contains so much. It's awesome. Alright guys, so my number 1 is a little bit controversial. So I just thought I should pop in and warn you, maybe, I guess. It is a little bit of a controversial choice, so you might not agree with me, but you know, it's my list. So without further ado, here's number 1. Yep, so number 1 is Richard Nain's. Now I know this does seem like quite a controversial number 1. But like I said, this is a personal list, and you know, there's just something about Richard Nain's music to me it really touches me. I mean, it's really emotional, and I mean, the structures are great, and his music is just really effective. I don't know what it is, but everything I've heard by him is just top-notch quality. I mean, I could just listen to his music for hours and not even get bored at all. I mean, it's just that good. I know a lot of you guys will probably disagree with me, and that's fine. I mean, I understand. He's not considered the best of composers, but I just love his music so much. You guys actually have no idea how hard it was for me to say all those things. So, without further ado, here's my real number one. Yep, so my real number one is Johannes Brahms. And this is still pretty controversial, I think, as a number one spot. Because out of the four big romantic piano composers, Brahms is by far the least innovative as far as his piano writing. And he's by far the least influential as far as his piano writing goes. And he's often not thought of as a piano-specific composer, at least not in the same way as Liszt or Chopin are. Usually when people think of Brahms, a lot of people are more likely to think of his symphonies or his concertos or possibly his chamber music. But to me, his piano music holds a very special place in my heart. I know that sounds cheesy, but I got really close to Brahms's piano music at a really weird time in my life. It was a very turbulent yet peaceful time, and I know that doesn't quite make sense, but life sometimes doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? But my close personal connection to Brahms' piano music is not the only reason why this Brahms is number one on this list. Another reason is because, again, as a whole, taken as an entire collection of piano pieces, I don't think I can think of another set of piano pieces that are quite as consistently top-notch as Brahms, or quite as solid. I mean, for me at least, out of all his piano pieces, there's not a single one I would get rid of. There's not a single one I don't really like that much. I love all of them, every single one, and that's not something I can say with most other of the composers on this list. Another reason why he's on this list is that his structures and his piano music, they're always really interesting, I found, and they're always really unique, and the structures really suit the piece quite well. I think that's something Brahms was very good at, is creating really unique structures that fit the mood of the piece. And he does that with all his piano pieces. Another thing that I really like about Brahms' music is that he doesn't literally repeat himself much. In fact, he hardly literally repeats himself at all, and instead, when a repeat comes, he prefers to vary the repeat a little bit, and that's something I really like about his music. And it's something that in Schumann or Chopin's music, I find a little bit annoying sometimes, the constant repeats of sections. And this is something you really find a lot less in Brahms' music. His music is always keeping things very varied and new and fresh, and I really like that. And I also just really love Brahms's emotional and expressionate quality. He just has this really let's get down to business quality about his music that really hits me very directly, emotionally. There's no fluff or excess in Brahms' music. It has this very sort of you get what you hear quality to it. That's something I really, really like. It's like Brahms is just sitting there talking to you about his day or something, or his life, or whatever. I usually don't really like analogies like that, actually, but I'll make an exception since this is number one. But yeah, I'm finding it a little hard to explain exactly why I like the emotional quality of Brahms's music. So sorry about that, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. I just find the emotion in Brahms's music to just be very real and down to earth, and it's not dramatic emotion. It's just this profound human emotion. That's what I really feel in Brahms's music, and so all those things combined make Brahms number one for his piano music on this list. So yeah. So that was my list. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really sorry it was so long. I didn't actually plan it to be that long, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you made it to the end, thank you for watching. See ya. Yep, so number one is Richard Naines. Now I told you it's quite controversial to put Richard Naines as number one. He's often not thought of as a really great piano composer. Oh, I can't do this. Yeah, so Richard Naines, I told you, number one is quite controversial. I mean, Richard Naines is often not really thought of as a great piano composer. But there's just something about his music that I find really appealing. Um, it's very emotional. And okay, enough laughing.